Hello, welcome. Tonight I wanted to tell a few ghost stories. These took place here in Mississippi when my mother was growing up. I grew up hearing these stories, and when I moved here with my mother in 1993, I was able to talk with people who had experienced those stories along with her. So I sort of verified these stories to their recollection, to their memories. They were the same as my mother's. So I feel that they're true stories. We know that something took place. And since it's getting so close to Halloween, the spooky season, so I've got 6 different stories here. The first one is the light that went into the cemetery. Now, this took place in the summertime. My mother and her brothers and sisters and her mother and her uncle had went out in the country to a family reunion and had spent the whole day eating, swimming, eating watermelon. And it was starting to get dark whenever they came home. And they were in my Uncle Jim B. Hancock's T-model Ford. And it did not have a top to it, so it was like a convertible, but the top was missing, canvas top, so they were having to go travel through these dirt roads without a top. And they were coming through the Vernon Church Road. All these roads back then, and that road still today is a dirt road. And as they were coming around the bend where they could see Vernon Church on the hill, and this was up in the night, so it was dark. But they could see the church in the distance, and they all noticed what appeared to be a light. They all thought it looked like a light from a lantern. It came out of the back door of the church and hovered on the back steps, and then started to make its way into the cemetery. Well, they were all scared to death. They were all screaming. My Aunt Carrie, she says, I saw it once and then I closed my eyes and refused to look because it scared her to death. So they talked about that for years and years, how that light had come out of that church and floated into the cemetery. As a kid, that would give me chills. And I would think about that every time she would take me to that church, because that's where our kinfolks, our ancestors were buried. So we always went there. So I thought about that, wonder who that was that came into the cemetery and what were they looking for? And why they did it just as these people were fixing to pass. So, well, the second story is about Tubby, the Choctaw Indian Tubby. Now, I have seen Tubby's grave. He is buried out at the Indian Cemetery at Dancing Rabbit Creek, where the treaty was signed when the Choctaws deeded the land that is now Noxubee County to the white man. He's buried there. I've seen his marker. But Tubby worked for my grandfather. He was one of the many sharecroppers that worked on his farm. And Tubby was a family favorite. They just loved Tubby. The kids especially, because he would tell them Indian stories. And of course, they loved to hear those kind of things. This was in the 1930s, whenever this took place. He had fallen in love with the daughter of Chief Cameron, who was the Noxubee County chief for the Noxubee County band of the Choctaw Indians. And Tubby wanted to marry her. And he forbid them to even see each other. Chief Cameron did. And Chief Cameron was a sharecropper on my grandfather's brother's farm. And Tubby made plans to go and steal her away and take her and get married. And Chief Cameron caught them and killed him, shot him with a gun. It wasn't long after that that they started seeing Tubby. It was usually, they said, when they would go and bring the cows in the afternoon, that they would see him peeking out from behind a tree. And of course, it scared those kids really bad. I said, well, how did you know it was Tubby if they just peeked out from behind a tree? It could have been somebody else. They said they knew Tubby. They knew him, knew that was him. Wonder what that was. My favorite ghost story has always been Aunt Leila's ghost. Aunt Leila was my grandmother's sister. And they had married brothers, so they lived really close. It was maybe a half a mile down the dirt road was the house that Aunt Leila and Uncle Clarence lived in. And Aunt Leila died in childbirth. And a year or so later, my Aunt Carrie, she had gotten married and had her only child, Bobby Earl, and he was a baby. And when her husband would be out at night, supposedly coon hunting or raccoon hunting, back in those days, people ate those. It was during the Depression. They ate what they could get. Well, we don't know if that's what he was really doing, but that's what he would say he was doing. And she would ask for her brothers. She had 3 brothers, J.H., Samuel, and Freeman. And they were little boys. But she would have them to come and stay with her when her husband Chalmers was gone. And on this one particular night, they were all startled to see Aunt Leila bent over, looking at the baby. And when she turned around and looked at the rest of them, they all freaked out. Aunt Carrie grabbed the baby, and the boys, they all just took to running, and they ran down that road, that half a mile, to my grandmother's house, just screaming and hollering and hooping, and telling them the story of them seeing Aunt Leila. I imagine it scared the hell out of them. But they all said that they actually saw it. So I'm presuming they did. But I'm guessing that since that was the house she lived in, that was the house she died in, and she died giving birth, possibly she was looking for her baby. But the baby wasn't there. Someone else had the baby. But I'm presuming that's what she was doing, looking for her baby. The next story is about Mr. Peavy. Well, Mr. Peavy was an old man that lived down the road from them, and his house was right off of the dirt road, and it was the road that they took to go to the Butler Church. That road's not even there anymore. And of course the house is not there. But Mr. Peavy, he passed away. And one evening my grandfather was on horseback. It was nighttime, but he was going to meet his family that were already at Butler Church. They had went in the wagon earlier, and he had to finish up what he was doing on the farm and then go and meet them. And he said that when he got to the Peavy place, it was dark, of course, because nobody was living there, but said his horse stopped right there, would not continue to go. It just stayed there. Nothing he could do to get that horse to go past that house. He got off, tried to lead it. It would not go past that house. He eventually had to turn back and take another road that did not go by the Peavy house. But Mr. Peavy had just died not long before that, so my grandfather always said that it was Mr. Peavy. But of course I don't know. My grandfather's long dead, and I did not verify that story with him, but it was a story he told his family. So I'm presuming there was something going on with Mr. Peavy's house. Okay, and the last one is the second story I have about the light coming out of the church. And fast forward about 10 years. This was during World War II. And this guy that we knew as an older man, he told me this story. He said that him and a buddy of his had taken these two girls out. They had went to the movies. And they decided to do a little sparking before they took the ladies home. So they had went down that road that goes past Vernon Church. And I'd say about a half a mile from the church, less than half a mile, maybe a quarter of a mile, there was another little church, a little white church, a little white frame church. And they parked in that in that parking area at that church. And of course they were making out and things. There was a couple in the back seat and a couple in the front seat. And the guy that told me the story, him and his girl were sitting in the back seat. And he said that during the time of them, you know, making out, he turned around and just glanced out the back window, and he noticed that there was a light at the back door of the church. And he told everybody what he'd seen. Everybody got out of the car and stood there and watched that light as it left the church and went into the cemetery. So again, that light went floating to the cemetery. Even today, I will not ride by that church at night. No. That original church is not even there anymore. They built a new church and tore the old one down. But still, a ghost may not know that. A ghost may think, the church is still here. I'm going to go ahead and, you know, do my thing. So I won't even go by there. Oh, I forgot to talk about the Banshee. The devil woman. My mama and her brothers and sisters, there was 2 sisters and 3 brothers, and they were walking up the road on their way to Vernon Church. It was at nighttime. And all of a sudden they started hearing these screeches out in the woods. They said that it scared them so bad that it made the hair on the back of their neck stand up. And they were just children. So they started running. And they said whatever it was running along with them, screaming the whole way. And they knew it was a she-devil. I have no idea what it was. It didn't sound too good, though, did it? No. I always considered probably maybe there was somebody out there had a steel. I don't know. Or maybe a screech owl or something, but the screech owl, would it follow them? I've never heard of that. But it was a scary story, especially when my mother would tell it. So, that's my stories, y'all. So y'all have a spooky Halloween.